Back to the panel. Sarah Westwood joins us, Washington Examiner, White House correspondent, along with Steve Cortes, again, spokesman for the Hispanic 100, also a Fox News contributor, and Christopher Hahn, progressive radio host and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer. Sarah, let me start with you. This is a delicate balancing act. Let's put it this way. The president is trying to thread the needle. He understood that the GOP leadership let him down big time with respect to Obamacare, at the efforts to repeal or replace that. So he's taking the bull by the horns, and he's being pretty adamant about what he wants.
Exactly. I think President Trump recognizes that at the end of September, Republicans will no longer be able to pass tax reform with just 51 votes. They'll need 60 votes in the Senate, meaning President Trump has to get at least 8 Democrats on his side. He can't do that with a purely Republican plan. He has to have some elements in that plan that can appeal to Democrats. That's why you see him focusing more on the kinds of talking points that might be more familiar in a Democratic tax plan, that the wealthy don't need to have a tax cut, that they may need to pay more, that this is going to focus on the middle class. But notice that President Trump is not necessarily saying that the rates for the wealthy are going to stay unchanged. He's saying that they're just going to end up paying the same. Now, that might mean that they lower the rates and try to close some of those loopholes, because that's something President Trump promoted on the campaign trail. We just don't know exactly what the plan looks like yet. But
that would make it harder to get Democratic support, though, because it would hit states like New York, New Jersey, California the hardest, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why you might see some resistance if the tax rates for the wealthiest Americans are adjusted down even just a little bit, and even if accompanying closing of tax loopholes were included in that.
Speaking of resistance, Steve, Republicans complained for 8 years about President Obama running up the credit card and destroying the future for our grandchildren. The narrative is changing a little bit. Hey, let's run up the credit card short term, because the economic boost that we're going to get out of it will take care of debt, create jobs, and all of those good things down the road. We've seen it done before. We saw it done with Ronald Reagan, so it's called supply side economics. It doesn't seem like enough Republicans believe in it anymore.
Right. Unfortunately, Charles, and they need to read their history books, because you're exactly right. The debt did initially explode, and then what did we run into? A surplus in the 1990s. We can have a similar scenario now. We are long past the point, by the way, as a country, where we can politically and even fiscally, where we can cut spending enough to address our debt. We need growth. It's the only way. We have to grow that side of the ledger. The main deterrent to growth, in my opinion, has been government in the form of regulation and taxes. Trump's already done a ton on regulation. Now we need to do it on taxes, and he's so right, by the way, I believe, to focus on the middle class. One of the main reasons, maybe the main reason, that he won in 2016 is for the last decade. It's been a wonderful decade, this slow growth recovery for those at the very top end of the economic strata of America. For the average worker, it's been a very tough slog. So he wants to deliver relief to them first and foremost. Once he does, we're going to see a growth explosion.
Chris, what would it take to get 8 Democrats? And we know there are 3, at least perhaps 3 moderate, sort of right-leaning Democrats who would be low-hanging fruit. But 8, is that possible, and what would it take?
You know, I think that if you deal with payroll taxes, which I think hits the middle class and the working Americans most, you'll get a lot more than 8 Democrats on board. But I got to, distinguish a few things here. I spent 8 years debating you about national debt. Now you're all for it. And I also got to, explain the difference between the national debt and a budget surplus. Clinton had a budget surplus. The debt was still rising. And we do have to deal with the debt at some point. But right now we are in a good recovery, and we should let that recovery play its course. And we will and are seeing the results of that spending that was done under Obama.
With all due respect, Chris,
a
good recovery might be more than 1% annual GDP growth. Guys, I'm sorry we got to leave it there, because I've got to get back to this breaking news.